All right, guys. So I have just one last video for you for today. And then this will complete the 3 videos that you need to watch before your quiz for tomorrow. So you're going to take your quiz first thing before we move on to our next lesson. All right, so today, or in addition to what we've already talked about, we're also going to talk about what living things need in order to survive. And when we're talking about what living things need in order to survive, we're talking about what all living things need in order to survive. So it's not just what humans need in order to survive, or dogs need, or cats, or lizards. It's what every single organism on the face of this earth needs in some way in order to survive. So today's goal, or I guess our second goal for today, is what do living things need to survive? We are going to understand the 4 basic needs of all organisms on Earth. So there are 4 basic needs that all organisms on Earth need in order to survive. Those 4 needs are food, water, living space, and a stable internal condition or stable internal conditions. So we're going to look at each of these 4 things in a lot more detail in the next 4 slides. But I want you to make sure that you're keeping in mind that these 4 things are what all living things on Earth need in order to survive. Okay, so the first thing that all living things on Earth need in order to survive is food. Food, remember, is a source of energy for organisms. And in order for an organism to survive, we need energy. And we get our energy through food. So living things obtain energy in lots of different ways, but it is primarily through the intake or production of food. So there are two different ways in which organisms get food on Earth. So for example, plants obtain their energy from the sun in order to make food. So plants are considered autotrophs. And if we break that word apart, auto means self and troph means feeders. So autotroph means self-feeder. So plants obtain their energy from the sun to make their own food through photosynthesis. Heterotrophs are organisms on Earth that cannot make their own food. So some organisms get their energy by feeding on other organisms. And in fact, heterotrophs oftentimes feed on autotrophs. So what we see is that heterotrophs can't make their own food. They must get their energy from some other source because they can't make their own food. So examples of heterotrophs are extensive, but 2 examples that I'll give for you guys are mammals in general and also mushrooms. So those 2 organisms or those many organisms on Earth can't make their own food. They can't create their own energy. They get it by feeding off of others. So food is a source that all living things need in order to survive. Without food, living things cannot survive. The next thing that all living things need in order to survive is water. And water is essential to life. Food you can last a couple of weeks without, but water you can only survive a couple of days without. And water is necessary for 5 reasons. It is necessary to get chemicals from surroundings. And remember, you need chemicals from your surroundings, from the external environment, from the food that you take in, from the nutrients that your body needs. You need chemicals in order for your body to survive. So you need water in order to get those chemicals from your surroundings. In addition, you also need water to break down food. Water moves substances through your body. And if you don't have water in your body, then you are unable to move those substances through the body in order for them to be digested. So water is necessary to break down food, and breaking down food requires substances being moved through the body. Body systems require substances to move throughout the body. In addition to those 3 things that require water in the body, growth and reproduction also require water. Without a certain amount of water, living things cannot grow or reproduce. So we can see that water is very valuable in the body. It's necessary for a number of different processes within the body. And we cannot survive, organisms on Earth cannot survive without water. So we so far have water and food that are essential to survival of organisms on Earth. In addition to those two things, living spaces are also necessary for survival on Earth. So all living things need a place to live. And this is because a place to live allows organisms to get the water that they need, the food that they need, and to find shelter. And those three things are necessary for survival. An organism's surroundings must provide what it needs to survive. So, for example, if we look at a cactus needs some water in order to survive, but it doesn't need a lot of water to survive. So that's why a cactus can survive in the desert, whereas, for example, a dog could not, because a dog needs a significant amount of water to live, whereas a cactus does not. A cactus can preserve its water supply for an extended period of time to still carry out its necessary survival functions in the body without depleting their water source until they can get some more water when it's available. Organisms also compete for space on Earth. So, for example, we see organisms that live in trees because there's not much space on the ground. So organisms are constantly competing for space on Earth. So some organisms, like this groundhog, live underground because there's not enough space to live on Earth. So we are constantly, as we've talked about in previous lessons, we're constantly competing for space on Earth, whether we are an organism like a dog or a cat or a panda bear or a kangaroo or humans. We are all constantly fighting for this space to survive on Earth. The final thing that is absolutely necessary for survival of all organisms on Earth is a stable internal condition or stable internal conditions. So, as you know, the conditions in the surrounding environment, the environment around you are constantly changing. For example, you can walk outside and the temperature is much colder outside. Um, and so your body has to maintain that constant temperature even if you walk out into a colder environment. So the environment inside the body must constantly remain the same, even though the external environment is constantly changing. And by the external environment, I don't just mean the temperature, I also mean like the chemical environment. For example, there are different oxygen levels at different altitudes, and your body has to adjust and adapt to those oxygen levels in order to survive. And organisms all over the earth have to do that. So we call this maintenance of the stable internal conditions homeostasis, and homeostasis is necessary for survival. Cells need homeostasis to function. Cells need a certain amount of water to function. They need a certain temperature within the body to remain alive. If the temperature in the body gets too hot or too cold, the cells can't survive. Cells need a certain amount of nutrients in order to survive. So homeostasis is absolutely essential to the body's ability to survive. Whether you are an animal, a human, bacteria, you need that stable internal condition in order to survive. So that takes us to the conclusion of this lesson. And tomorrow you are going to have tomorrow you're going to have a short quiz over these last three lessons. So please do be on the lookout for that tomorrow. I will post it on Google Classroom. You will be able to answer in multiple choice format, most likely, those quiz questions, and then I will grade them. And that quiz will probably be out of about 20 points. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. If you have not already done so, please make sure that you did those vocabulary words. You found the definitions of the vocabulary words, because I will be grading those today. So thank you guys very much for your time. Send me any emails if you have any questions, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow for our live math lesson at 10:30 a.m. Thank you guys.